You're on the Somar channel. Enjoy watching. I'm not a lawyer, but a hilarious case between a father and son took place in my city. My father is a well-known personal injury lawyer who founded his own firm under his own name, George Sink, and his son eventually joined the family business. Anyway, they had a falling out, and my son quit his job to start his own company. And his name is like his father's. So the father sued his son for using the name he had given him to start his own law firm. I once witnessed a defendant who was in custody and did not have the means to cover the costs of defending his interests in court, telling the judge that his government lawyer was not working hard enough, and he wanted the judge to appoint another lawyer for him. The judge asked him what exactly was wrong with him, and he replied, "I don't need a female lawyer. I need a man who can approach things responsibly and fight for me," or something similar. The judge, also a woman, said that it didn't work that way, and then he started shouting and going into details about his government lawyer. Basically, his claims were as follows: "I don't like her, she doesn't schedule meetings with me," and so on. The judge looks at him irritably and says, "Okay, I'll assign you another defense, but since you're not satisfied with your lawyer and I need time to appoint a new one, I won't deal with your case today, and will return it for a new hearing." A few days later, the judge sends the defendant a notification about the appointment of a new lawyer who, as it turned out, is also a woman, and a notification about the postponement of the case for 6 weeks. Initially, there was talk of bail, and the district attorney and the public defender agreed to release him on unsecured bail, which meant he would have been released the same day if he hadn't thrown a tantrum. Instead, he stayed in prison for another 6 weeks, only to be represented by another female lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but this story still amazes me. My biological grandmother died 20 years ago from ovarian cancer, and she left all her money, trusts, and bonds to my grandfather so that he could use them while he was alive and split them after death. About 15 years ago, my grandfather married my foster grandmother for the second time, and he died a few years ago. My step-aunt is a greedy bitch who lives on the opposite side of the country and has lived off her mother and my grandfather all her life. She came to them and took them on a vacation, where she used their money to buy clothes for herself and spent free time at the ski resort 8 times a year. After my grandfather's death, my foster grandmother had to move to the place where her children lived to receive care, as she developed dementia. Step-aunt got access not only to her mother's property to take care of her needs, but also to my grandfather's. It wasn't enough. She decided to sue my father and uncle for the inheritance of their deceased biological mother. My father is paralyzed on both sides and uses a wheelchair. My uncle has had 3 heart surgeries, he has a pacemaker, and a lot of limitations. Both receive disability benefits. The court date arrived, and I literally wheeled my father into the courtroom, while my uncle entered with a cane. My step-aunt is fully capable and is basking in the millions that my grandfather and step-grandmother earned all their lives. One look at the whole picture was enough for the judge to completely ban her access to my biological grandmother's property. We stayed there for less than an hour. The wife filed for a ban on approaching during the divorce process because she wanted the house to stay with her. My husband has a good job. The salary is about $200,000 a year. His employer finds out about the restraining order, and the husband is fired. He worked in a very specialized field, so the only job he can find near his home, ex-wife and daughter, earns $50,000 a year. A foreclosure ban is imposed on the house. Alimony payments are less than $500 per month. My wife has to get a job as a waitress. 4 cars are being withdrawn for non-payment. I am not a lawyer, but my father is a doctor, and he is sometimes called as an expert witness in cases of criminal negligence. In one memorable case, a family sued a doctor for something rather frivolous, and my father was a witness for the defense. The lawyer representing the family conducted a cross-examination of my father. As proof, he cited a chapter from a medical textbook and asked Dad to read the highlighted paragraph. The father read it, and the lawyer says something like, "So what you just read means blah blah blah, something in medical language." My dad confidently replies, "No, that doesn't mean that." Lawyer: "No, if you're reading XYZ, the author is clearly stating blah blah blah, something in medical language." Dad: "No, really, the author means something else." Lawyer: "How do you know that's not what the author meant?" Dad: "Well, because I wrote it." The judge made a facepalm while the lawyer gasped for air like a goldfish, staring at the author's name listed in the chapter. In fact, it was the best moment in my father's professional life. Yes, the decision was made in favor of the accused. It wasn't my case, but I followed it closely because it was my friend's divorce proceedings. He and his ex-wife shared commercial real estate, which was worth a lot of money. The documents were on both of them, so they had access to the same information. Well, the shit got on the fan, and the property was in arrears, and I think it was seized. The husband tried to talk to his then-wife about all this, but she just froze. She not only ignored him and his financial affairs, but also started cheating on him. Let's move on to the divorce. It follows a dispute between the parties, and they begin to fight for the main housing, the market value of which, and the house was debt-free, is much less than that of a commercial building. She demanded the house, and her husband actually offered to give her the commercial building if he kept the house. She never paid attention to how bad things were with commercial real estate, and for some strange reason, her lawyer did not conduct any expertise, so they agreed to the deal. I do not know if the asset allocation included any conditions for getting out of the situation or reservations for the ex-wife. But I like that her own disinterest may have led to her having debt-ridden property instead of a fully paid house. A vile legal battle for custody of children. His ex-wife was a lawyer and represented herself. And my ex-husband's lawyer was pretty shitty. The woman dragged everything to court in order to get more compensation from her ex. And his lawyer allowed this to continue, ruining his life with accusations of child abuse. And everything took so much money from him that he could barely afford to rent a shitty apartment, and there was no question of a car. The last two facts were later attributed to this case as well. As a result, the father of the ex-wife, he was also a lawyer, asked for a meeting with the judge, where he mentioned several things that he knew. One of the children suffered from manic depressive disorder, and his ex-wife stopped giving him medication when it was her ex-husband's turn to be with the children. The allegations of abuse stemmed from the fact that he was trying to restrain the child when he was having a manic episode due to the cessation of medication. The ex-wife specifically made accusations of abuse before the holidays so that the ex-husband would not be able to see the children on Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. She boasted to her relatives that, in this way, she would cause him maximum emotional damage. In addition, she forged documents to overstate her ex-husband's income when the amount of alimony was being determined. Oh, and she also slept with his lawyer. I won't go into details because of confidentiality, but I had a client who was accused of a very heinous sexual crime. He had an alibi. He was at work at the time, where he holds the position of boss. One employee could tell for sure that he was there. I talked to the employee, and he confirmed it. The trial is approaching, and around that time, I need to send a notice of intent to provide an alibi, meaning a prior notice to the court so they can check the alibi and determine if it is true. But I'm careful, so I'm calling that employee again. It turned out that during this time, my client managed to fire him, so the employee tells me quite frankly, yes, he was definitely at work, but at the trial I will say something else. To hell with him, let them lock him up. I did not call him as a witness and did not file an alibi statement. We won the trial anyway, but if I hadn't thought to call this guy, or if he had been less open, my client would have had a very difficult time. Sex offender registry, prison term, all cases. And he's completely innocent.